All right. So I'm doing a automation install on a golf course, and I left my laptop in my bag and came back to my Airbnb for this. So I'm kind of winging it. I didn't want to cancel on you. It might be the best podcast I ever produce. We'll see. But
Yeah.
so kind of bear with me, Russell. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to the audience since I don't have my pre-show research sitting on a screen on my laptop. So, but I read about you. I know what you do, so I'll be able to steer us through it. And to the listeners, this is what happens when you're in the life of Joe and you're hopping from one thing to another. But I really wanted to make sure I didn't cancel on Russell. So Russell, I apologize, but like I said, hopefully you work through it, and go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience so they know why I wanted to make sure you were on Automating Success today.
Oh, all right. No, please don't worry about it at all. I understand. I work with robots. Things go wrong all the time. So yeah, don't worry about it. So Russell grew up in a small farming community in Utah and graduated in mechanical engineering from Brigham Young University. He started Sisu with his friend Mark Christensen in 2010 in Austin, Texas, just out of our garage. Sisu makes robots easy to use for businesses who are just starting out with automation. They've helped dozens of companies install their first robots and have built robotic systems for some of the biggest tech companies. During COVID-19, Sisu worked around the clock to create an FDA-approved ventilator for hospitals that were quickly running out. They've created a line of knife sharpening robots for the food processing industry and cinema robots that are used to make commercials and movies. He has a beautiful wife and 4 kids, loves riding around his small farm on a tractor, and serves in a leadership role in his church. There you go.
So, I think you actually read it better than I would have anyways. I think the universe like kind of told me I should have forgotten my stuff today. So you could do that for me, So yes. So this is who we have on the show today. And I always start saying, okay, so you're in automation, but you like to ride your tractor on your small farm. So, what fuels you? What got you into this space in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I always loved coming up with new ideas and inventions. I should thank my dad for fueling that. When I was just a kid, I wanted a car. Kind of a weird thing for a kid to. I want a real car, not a little car. I want a real car. And so for my 11th birthday, he found this old truck down the road. It was a 1971 Ford truck. And he spent $50 on it. I'd saved up $100, and we bought that. It was a 3 on the tree, which if people don't know what that is, it's a manual transmission. You shift it on the column. It had every problem you can imagine. I'd be driving it down the road. The brakes would stop. The steering would stop working. The thing would shut off. I mean, and this is when I was 11 years old, driving it around at night in the country. So I think my dad just instilled a love of just tinkering with things, making little inventions, blowing things up, potato guns, that kind of stuff. The things that you keep yourself busy with when you grow up in a small town. And it kind of progressed from there. I went on a mission for my church, came back, thought I wanted to help people and be a doctor. Went to my biology classes and was drawing inventions on my biology homework and not doing my biology homework. And so I got out of that and graduated mechanical engineering, was on the race car team in college, and came down to Austin, Texas to work for a while, and then started a business.
So that's awesome. It's kind of like my story. And I like the sitting in biology class, inventing things on the side, because that's sometimes you have that. Once you have that mindset, you're always thinking to solve problems in spaces, right? So I think everybody that's in automation, you're looking at things daily thinking that's a problem that could probably be solved through automation. Yeah. So, to date, what's probably your favorite project you've actually worked on? Your biggest problem you've solved?
I mean, there's a couple. Some of them are kind of fun. Let's start with one in college, actually. Right after I switched majors, I was in this class, and there were 200 people in the class, and the professor started off by saying only 2 people are going to get an A on the final project out of these 200. He said, this thing's got to be related to history, and it's got to be so creative it makes my socks go up and down. And so I thought about that for a little bit, and I called his wife, found out who she was, did a little bit of stalking, and went to her and said, hey, I need a pair of Dr. Strong's socks. Can you help me out? And explained what I was doing. She thought that would be funny. So she gave me some of his socks, and I made this little steam engine in the shop. and we fired up all the projects at the end of the class, the last day of class. And there was this little steam engine with a crankshaft and his socks on the end going up and down like this. And he was good to his word and gave me an A. So I was one of the two. So there's one. The COVID-19 one, that was interesting. We had, everybody was sent home from work. We sent all of our people home like everybody else. And then we had a previous customer call up and he said, I've been looking at this thing and New York is going to run out of ventilators in 2 weeks. Can you guys build a ventilator? How quickly? And I said, that's interesting. What's a ventilator? I didn't know what it was. And, we did some research and found out kind of what it was. And we called up everybody. None of us knew how big this thing was. None of us knew how scary it was. We had no idea what to expect. But we called up everybody and said, this might be the most important thing we ever do. We need everybody to come back to work. We've got to build a ventilator. And we just worked around the clock. We got one of those bags you see on the ER shows that they work to resuscitate people, and we had a bunch of motors in stock. We said we could make this thing and 3D print some parts and put it together and make this, this thing work. And we said, while we're at it, we can put some sensors on it that measure how a patient's breathing and do all these things. And anyway, in 16 days, we had 200 ventilators sitting on a table ready to ship to New York if they needed them. And luckily, they didn't run out. They came within a day or two of running out. And we kept going. We kept working. And, supply chain was tough. Everybody was amazing. I mean, we'd call up companies. Usually it takes 6 weeks to get custom parts made. We'd call up companies and tell them what we're doing. They said, that's incredible. We'll call all of our guys back. We'll work through the night. We'll have you parts in the morning, right? So these design cycles that are usually like 3 months long were 3 days long. We would design, build, and put it all together in 3 days and then iterate on it. And we did that for months. I've never been more tired in my entire life, but it got FDA approval. Thank goodness we didn't end up needing them here in the United States. And so we shipped all the ones that we made to Bangladesh, and where, over there, they give somebody one of those bags and hand it to a family member and say, squeeze this as long as you want to. And that's it. It's pretty rough. So those are over there blessing some lives. So that was a cool project. Let's see, other robotic things, we, and you can interrupt me at any time.
No, this is great. I'm loving it.
All right. No worries. We'll get through it together. So we at one point in our business, we got in an industrial robot arm, right? These are the ones you see on the news that are building the cars. And we started working on this project and we thought, my goodness, these things are hard to use, even just to do simple things. It takes so much programming. And we thought, what would be a better experience to program these? We thought, if you could put an iPad in one hand, everybody knows and loves those. If you could put a game controller, like a Wiimote or something in the other hand, and the robot follows your hand and you can just kind of record your moves, that just feels like the most natural thing you could do and people would get it. And so we created this thing. We brought in a cinematographer to make a video for it. We thought we'd use it for welding and industrial applications. And this guy said, wow, this is cool. Have you ever thought of putting a camera on the end of one of these arms? And we thought, no, that's not a thing. Nobody does that. He said, no, it is a thing. It's been a thing for the last 25 years. But the ones that are on there they're just hard to use. They take a long time to use. People don't know how to program them. When you need to make a change, it takes a long time. Everybody's waiting on the robot. So what I've seen you do here is incredible. If you could do that, that would be amazing. So we humored him. We put it on Instagram, and we got orders for like 4 of them right off the bat. And these things aren't cheap, right? So we, out of that, kind of grew a whole segment for our business of making these robots that you put a camera on that make, high-end commercials and Hollywood movies. And anyway, it's kind of a fun application that just spun out of a random comment of, have you guys ever thought of putting a camera on this? So
you've said we several times. So how many people are on your team of we? How many people do you have?
Good question. So we used to be me and my buddy Mark in a garage with a bunch of mosquitoes. And now we is about 75 people. We have about half of us are engineers. We have, great machinists and technicians and a variety of people.
So When you started getting in automation, did you ever see that you were going to have 75 great people that you were going to be working with, or kind of explain like like to me, it's like I know for me when I got in, it's like everything kind of starts. Obviously, every idea starts small and grows, right? So, kind of take me through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think we always hoped so. It was interesting. I still remember this. I came home to my wife one day and said, "Hey, me and Mark are going to start a company. What do you think?" And she said, "Huh, well, what's the worst that could happen?" And I said, "Well, we could, we're both from Utah. We moved to Texas, not knowing anybody." And I said, "Well, we could lose everything and have to move back to Utah." And she said, "Well, we don't have anything, and I'd love to move back to Utah, so go ahead." And I have a wonderful wife. She is so patient and so kind. So we decided to start it. We hoped it would grow into something big. Our first project, we did this random machine that you shoot a Nerf dart gun into it, and it moves a target at high speed with high speed cameras and motors to have that target hit a bullseye right in the middle. It was a trade show demo that we did for a motor company. We worked night and day on that thing. We ended up we calculated at the end, we made $7 an hour on that project. But it kicked us off. And Intel was one of the people at the conference that saw that. We did a big musical robotic demo for them. And we started hiring people, and down the road we went. National Instruments is another great tech company here in town. It's actually who I worked for when I came here. They had a problem. They said, "We want to make a semiconductor test system. We don't have that." They were going to farm it out to this other company. It was just me and Mark at the time. And we thought, it'd be cool if they did it this different way, if they had it look like this. So we ran home and did a bunch of renderings at night and showed up and presented them to the vice president the next day. We said, "We think you should build this instead of this, beige box, build this. Customers will look at that and want it." And he said, "I want that." I said, "Exactly. We should build that." So he had us build that, and that really kicked the company off for the next 3 or 4 years. Helped us hire a bunch of people, move into a space. We bought a little machine shop, and we've since expanded that. And we have another location, which is our cinema robot location, but that's kind of how it went.
Yeah. So, I used to work. I think sometimes the best founders and owners are people that actually worked somewhere first, right? And then decided they were going to start their own organization. So what is it, what was it that made you say, I think you got into it, you said it with your wife, but at the core, before you got her buy-in, what was the trigger for you to kind of say, yeah, I want to do it for myself and not work for someone doing it?
Yeah, I think that's always been in me. I think we live in the greatest country on earth. I love our country. I've been amazed growing up hearing the stories of people that have just created something that has added a lot of value and made people's lives better, and just how much fun that process is. And I just admire people who are able to do that. I've always wanted to be one of those people that could add value to people's lives. And I thought I'm not going to grow up in America and not try this. We might crash and burn, but we're going to try it. So there was a lot of that. I met Mark. Mark he's the engineer's engineer. He's one of the most brilliant people I know, my business partner. He is the brakes in the company, and I am the gas, and you do need both. Those are both important. But we both wanted to start a company, and kind of where I think the key is really service, is really wanting to help somebody else and make it bigger than yourself. And so all of these epiphany moments have always happened when we've seen somebody else that has a problem and thought maybe we could help with that. Maybe we could add some value to that. And that's the moment when we left. Is National Instruments was coming out with all these products that were great products, but they were very complex, and people were struggling. Businesses were struggling to use them and to make a robotic system using these things. And we thought, what, we could help companies do that. We could start off with National Instruments stuff, and we could put those together into systems and sell those to customers. And so I guess that's kind of what kicked us out the door.
So I love that you referred to your partner as the brakes and you're the gas. my business partner is my brother, and I say I'm the hot air balloon, and he's the tether to my hot air balloon. So very, very similar. So you are 100% right. They do take both. I constantly say if it was all on me, I'd probably bankrupted us already because I see a problem with things. Just pour gas on it. We'll get to it. And yeah, he's like, no, slow it down a little. So that's great. So I liked when I was doing the research, that your guys' mission is to make things automation that's more easily usable, especially for small business, right? Why do you think automation gets made complicated? Well, what is it that you see different that others are missing?
I don't know that they're missing it. It's hard. What Leonardo da Vinci, the simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Steve Jobs making things so simple and beautiful, but the work that goes into that is just intense. And none of the projects we've ever done have we ever thought it would take remotely that much work to get it to actually work, right? And I think that so many times, though, we want something to be bigger and better, and we want to add this or add that, when what we need to look at is what do we need to take away to kind of enhance that experience and to focus. So, and also sometimes, we have all these tools that we want to use, but we kind of forget what the original problem was. The cinema robots, I think, are a great example. Like, we make a robot that's easy to program. Nobody cares. They don't want that. They want their ketchup bottle pouring ketchup out to look beautiful. They want the hamburger to look incredible so that people buy it. And are there better ways to do that than a robot? Yeah, there are, and they're coming. But again, I think we think, well, we've got a robot, we got to use it. But what does the customer really want? And what are the things that are getting away of the experience? And can we strip all that stuff away and make an elegant experience that just delights the customer?
So I think I should have rephrased maybe the way I asked my question. So I'm gonna say something.
Sorry, I went on track.
No. I like the track you went on. I actually liked it. Added a lot of value, even for me, to kind of hear what you had to say. So no, I think there's a lot of great automation out there. You brought up, we make automation that's easy to program, but nobody wants it, right? Yep. I speaking from my own experience, why I'm successful in the space and automation is I believe, and maybe you can comment back to this, there's a lot of engineers that they make something, and since they made it, it's easy for them to use it because they are the maker of it, right?
Yeah.
And then they hand it off to an end user, and the end user is like it's like reading, ancient Egyptian. They don't understand what they're looking at. So one of the things for me, and I've been very fortunate, I hope it continues this way for at least a long enough time to leave my mark on the world, is we fill that void. Like, I take automation that's made and then make it easy for the end user, because I hire people to do the in between, so they get the perfect application of ketchup from the bottle because my people make it perfect. So is that one of the things you guys are doing differently when you make them even easier to program or whatever, to say, okay, we have to make it easier for our end user? And then the next question would be, have you ever thought about just bridging that gap, so when you supply it to the end user, you make sure it works from start to finish all the time, So.
Yeah. Good question. I agree with you that a lot of times engineers will fall in love with their invention, right? We have all these ideas in the shower or wherever, and we think because we woke up in the middle of the night with this idea, it's a great idea. It may be, it may not be, but the test is to put it in somebody else's hands and see if it's any good, and then to constantly be learning and observing. So I really like, we're big fans of fail fast, fail often. We fail all the time. But putting something in somebody's hands and again, see what they do with it. There's, as far as the end user of ours, it's interesting. I have a lot of thoughts go through my head. I think some of the best products are the ones that can grow with you, that when you get it, it's pretty easy to use and it's very powerful, but you don't know that yet. And then because you're not good enough to use it, and it's not there burdening. All these great features are not burdening you yet. They're hidden away. They're there if you need them later, but they're kind of hidden away. And so if you can make a thing that's simple to use at the outset, but later you can get more complex, I think that's very valuable. I
See,
lost
what
my
we've
keep
a lot.
going.
Well, so what I found is a lot of people don't want to get to the point of complexity, right? I mean, listen, I mean, myself, I mean, the phone I'm having to hold through this podcast right now is the whole time I'm thinking, why did they put the port on the bottom? Because I can't just lean it up on this cookie jar, so I wouldn't have to hold it because the charging cord is in it, so I don't run out of battery, right? It's like little stuff like that, right? Okay, but I'll deal with it. But when you look at like automation, um, and like I said, I mean, I don't know if you know about us, but we automate with lawnmowers and golf picking equipment, and I automate ball washing. And what I found is people just don't want to even touch it in the first place. Like if they use automation, they just want it to exist. And what I always find is crazy is people are worried that the robots are going to take over the world, but they're pushing them to take over the world because they don't want to interact with the robot at all. So it's like, we want automation, we don't want to touch it, but yet I'm scared the robot's going to take over the world. So, so don't make one too smart, right? It's a real brain bender to me, right? So, you know, I just want to see in your field if you experience that same thing. I often wonder if it's only my field or if it's all automation fields experience the same operational middle ground where the people in the middle just can't bridge the gap.
Yeah, I think a few thoughts come to mind. That's always been a fear, right? Ever since, I'll go nerdy for a second. I remember on Star Trek, they talked about that the workers threw their wooden shoes called sabots into the machines to stop them in Holland, right? Because they thought the windmills were going to take away people's work. And that's a real story, right? That's where sabotage comes from. And so that's always been a fear that's been with us, is that robots are going to take work. Here's what we see. We go in to automate something, and it's almost always the same story. Every single process that somebody calls us in to automate, I call it the 3-month rule. They have somebody there doing it, and that person lasts 3 months on average. They'll do it for 3 months, and then they're done. They leave. And they keep hiring somebody, and everybody's sick of it. And so, yes, they're afraid that, just like you said, there's the brain bender. Yes, they're afraid that robots are going to take their job, but nobody wants to do this thing, right? They keep having to train people to do it. And I remember another time we went in, and they have these, they gave us a red hard hat. Those were the visitor hard hats. And the people in the company know that when the red hard hats come around, it's because they're looking to automate something else. And they're nervous about it. And they're nervous about telling how to do this job because they think it's going to get replaced. And the guy who owned the facility, he said, if I could automate everything, if I automated everything in here that I can realistically automate, it's about 20% of the things in here. That's about it. After that, it gets very complex. He said, you know what our turnover is every year? He said, it's 20%. He said, so everybody in this company that wants a job has a job, and they don't need to worry about that. And that's not unusual. We see that in all these different places that we go. I mean, some other stats that I'm sure you're familiar with is we deal in robot arms and industrial arms. And so they track those very carefully, and they track the number of jobs. And actually, it's the number of, historically, you look at the number of shipments of robot arms, how they kind of go up and down, generally up. But as the number of robot arms goes up, the number of jobs also goes up. And it's because, and it happens every time we have a customer, we sell them a robotic system, they're able to do more things. They need to ship more, they hire more people to ship, they're able to build more stuff. They just grow. In general, they just grow, and they're not laying people off.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with that. First of all, I loved what you said about the 20%. We'd automate 20% of what we do, and our turnover is 20%. So nobody's losing their job, right? And even in my landscaping business, one of the things that I said is, when you turn on the news and you hear a lot of stuff and people talk about, equal, fair pay and all stuff. Well, the reality is a lot of the jobs people don't want to automate are the jobs that you can't raise the wages because the economy doesn't support that wage to make it, especially in our country. So if you automate it, it brings more manufacturing in. I always think it's an interesting thing when you're talking about climate change and how much we how much fuel we use to ship products all over the world. When if we automated in the countries that they could get built in and build it for a similar price all over the world, we would cut down diesel and shipping and all this other stuff. But no one ever wants to talk about it. And it's because I believe sometimes people think they forget the fact that we are a growing, like the human race, we constantly continue to population increases. So you need more goods, and the things that are getting made, we're a throwaway society almost in a lot of countries now. It's not only the United States, like people always talk about us, but many countries are this way. So yeah, I think it's great. And I only like to bring it up with other people because, well, A, it's part of what we do in automation, but B, I'm always interested in hearing other people's takes in other segments of automation, because it actually helps inspire me myself. Because some days it's like you talk to so many people to talk about automation, and some days it feels like you're running your head into a wall, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so not to stay too long on this topic. So what, so where you're at with the business, what are some future goals? Like, are you very happy with the size and the stuff you're producing? How someone like you, I mean, you're in the manufacturing, you're in making the automation. I'm a user of automation. What are some long-term, things you guys are looking to do at the company?
Yeah. Good question. Maybe if I could dwell on that previous topic for just a second, because I had a thought come up. So one, and it kind of relates to this next question too, the growth. So one of the products we make is a knife sharpening robot, which people think of knives and robots, two of the greatest things ever, right? We'll put them together. It's a cool product. Where that one comes in is that there's these cattle processing facilities up in North Texas and other parts of the world, where they will slaughter 5,000 or 6,000 head of cattle per day, right, in one building. And these folks are sharpening 2,000 or 3,000 knives a day. And you just have, this guy who's just sharpening a knife all day long, and his wrists wear out. And again, kind of the 3-month rule, it doesn't want to do that very long. And so this machine will basically take any knife, and robots have sharpened knives for a long time, but the ones we make are able to pick up any knife, figure out what it is. It's an old knife, new knife, sharp, dull, curved, straight, whatever. Figure out what it is and sharpen it, and put a perfect grind on it. And it's gotten to the point where, some people talk about, well, we don't like this because, this is taking away this guy's job. Well, this guy still has a job. He's feeding the machine, or he's doing other things, or doing maintenance on the machine. But the factory workers, actually, their injuries, their repetitive strain injuries from cutting meat, in many cases have gone to zero, because all of a sudden they have a sharp knife every time. And in some cases, they've even said they can tell when the robot's not working, and they said, we don't want to go back to work again until the robot's working. And so it almost becomes the inverse of that, right? They just want to have these knives, and it becomes known in these different plants. Well, I work in this plant, I work in that one. Does your plant have the robotic knife sharpener? Because if it doesn't, you don't want to be there. That's their whole livelihood, is that knife. So I think it's where things are going. We've just got to get used to it. Our goals for that, we sell that to a company who's doing a great job getting those placed around the country and different places in the world. We want to grow that. I think that technology can be used a number of different ways. I think there's a lot more jobs in that industry, in the food processing, that people don't like to do, that we can do some automation in. We want to grow our cinema business. Of course, our whole thing is, let's find a new problem. Let's solve it. Let's make sure it's a good problem to solve. Let's solve it. Let's build a business unit around it that we can spin off as its own company. And let's just keep working, finding these problems, spin off a unit. So, knife sharpening is an example of that. Cinema robots are an example of that. We've got some other ones coming up that we're pretty excited about, but just tackling one of these at a time that we think is a good next step based on the technology that we already have. And so we like our core group, the size we have now of, 30, 40 people in this one building. But as we spin these off, we think that's how we grow, as we spin off these other companies that can go and, prosper.
So, the knife sharpening thing is amazing for me. And I'm thinking two things. First, in my industry, even though I'm going to robots that have razor blades, but sharpening lawnmower blades is like one of the most dangerous parts of the job. And no one ever sharpens them properly. They don't balance the blade. They never get the right angle. And if you don't have the right angle on a blade, you could actually be dulling it for all you know, right? So the first thing I thought of, and I just want to say this so people listening, and hopefully you'll share this podcast, I think that the knives probably last longer too, right? Because your robot probably doesn't take off extra material to get the angle right. It probably can get the angle, tell me if I'm right or wrong, the precision angle it needs with less passes than the human, correct?
Yeah, it's very interesting, the things that we've learned, because now you can tune it, right? You can sharpen it as much or as little as you want. And so how much do you really need to be sharpening it? It's very counterintuitive in a number of ways. If you watch somebody sharpen a knife, what you'll see as you go into these plants is that somebody has a box of knives sitting on top of their sharpener, and they'll grab a knife and they'll stick it in there, and it looks kind of like this. And then they grab the next one and it looks like that. And they'll sharpen a knife in, I don't know, 5 or 6 seconds, right? Pretty fast. And so most people think, oh, your robots are faster. They're not. Our robot has to grab a knife, take it over to a scanner, figure out what it is, and then, sharpen it, and it sharpens it more slowly. But it's better, and it does it the same way every single time. And so if you're just looking at, well, the labor savings, it doesn't make sense. Yes, it helps with the labor, but it's really in the quality control and the reduced injuries. And when you have these companies that spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars in knives every year, and you can reduce that by a significant percentage, that's huge. And like you talked about with the angle, for the first time, you can say, well, what if we had instead of a 27-degree angle, what if we had a 29-degree angle? All right. What if we make that a little bit more blunt? So it's not as sharp, but maybe it lasts longer. Is that better for our workers? Well, I don't know. Let's test it and find out. But we finally have some control over that.
Well, so our robots go slower than humans also. But I always say, if there's not a human sitting on it or sitting in a chair using it, it doesn't, the labor cost goes away. That person in that chair can go someplace else. And I know with yours, it's a touch different, but yeah, you brought up, if you're spending less money on knives, workman's comp goes down. The system pays for itself. So I would think, though, hearing you say that they can save hundreds of thousands of dollars on their knives, do the knife companies hate you? Or are they like, well, you make our knives better, so, it's higher quality? Like, how does that work for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I hope they're not listening to your podcast. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I don't want to see like a Russell voodoo doll at a knife company, someplace, So what made you even know that was a problem in the first place? That there's a knife sharpening problem in the industry. Like, is there any background to that, or you just realize this is something we can make, so let's do it?
Yeah, I love it. It's one of the kind of problems that we love to find, because it's not intuitive, right? Most people don't wake up and think, I bet there's some poor guy, gal sharpening, 3,000 knives every day in a refrigerator, and they just hate it. And nobody knows that. They just go and eat a burger or whatever, and they don't really think about how that meat was cut and where that comes from. And so when people think of automation robots, they think about, there's a robot flipping the burger at McDonald's, someone's going to make and they are, right? Or there's, mowing lawns. Maybe your stuff is more visual, where people say, okay, I get it. There's a robot doing that. This one actually came from, it's super random. It was my business partner, Mark, his former roommate, who started his own business doing some rendering and some automation stuff. He ran into this guy who was doing wanted to do a knife sharpener. And he had teamed up with a guy that he met in an airport that was actually a doctor from Amarillo that had performed thousands of carpal tunnel surgeries on people that work in meat packing plants whose wrists were all worn out. And so that unlikely random team somehow called us to see if we could actually build this machine that they'd been dreaming about for a long time. But it kind of helped us to say, okay, when we want to go look at another opportunity, are we looking at the one that everybody's looking at, super popular, that's also super crowded, or can we find something that is, maybe it's not as big, maybe it's a little more obscure, but it's a good business and it's a good problem that maybe not as many people are aware of.
So how long does your sharpening stone last? Do the stones last longer, or how does that work out?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the exact answer to that. We've experimented with, it depends on a lot of things. We've experimented with a lot of things. I think is it a week maybe that it lasts and then they change them out?
So does the meat does the slaughtering house change those out, or do you guys change them out?
The slaughtering house does. Yep.
Do they have any trouble doing that, or that's pretty easy for them to do?
It's pretty easy now. Again, it's one of those things that we learned a lot on, and the way that we were having a lot of problems. That was one where, I love lean manufacturing stuff. I love the principles. One of the principles from Toyota is, go to the Gemba, right? Go to the place where it actually happens. So that was one of those things was a big problem. That's one that I decided, I'm going to go look myself and see what this is like. And so I went and watched this happen, watched them change the stones. And we've got guys that build these machines that are 6 feet tall, that put these things together. And when I went to this particular plant, the two guys that were working on this were very short, and it was very difficult for them to get where they needed to be to change this. And you had one guy trying to hold the stones and another guy trying to turn a wrench, and didn't have a brake on it, and it was just the whole thing was difficult. And I went to talk to them about the things that were hard with this. And so we got instructions. What's so hard about this? And these guys didn't speak a whole lot of English. And I asked them, well, what about you other guys? Like, well, we've got a guy who speaks Vietnamese, and we've got another guy who speaks Spanish, and we've got another guy they were telling about. And very few people, I think zero in this plant was English, their native language. And whether that should be or not is, whatever, but that's how it is. And so the instructions were worthless to them. And so we replaced all of this. We made things more accessible. We made these big posters that went on the side that had very few words. They had different languages. Mostly it was it was pictures. It was just sequential pictures of how you do this, and put those up on the machine. We gave them a tool packet with tools attached to the machine that didn't walk off. And just a few fairly simple changes, honestly, and that big problem just went away.
Yeah, I see. So this is what we do at AOS: is we're those stone changers. So we make it where they don't even have to learn how to do it. But it's why I asked the question, because I feel like that's where I was going with my question, 20 minutes ago or whatever, where people get it, they use it, and then they've seen too many, Terminator movies where when he gets his arm cut, he goes into the bathroom and fixes it himself, So then they're like, well, they changed the stones. And, I'm surprised they haven't said to you like, hey, you made a machine to sharpen the knife. Why don't you make a machine? Why doesn't the same machine put in the stones? Which I'm sure, Russell, one day that is how this will start to go, but right now it doesn't, So you said a 6 foot tall person lifting these up. How large are these machines?
They're about 7 foot. It would fit in a 7 foot cube, roughly.
Awesome. So going back to the ventilator thing, were you able to do that with the 75 people that you have, or did you have to staff up for that?
Yeah, I actually had a lot fewer back then. We probably had half that team at the time. It was amazing. I think it brought the team together in a way that we already have such a good crew. We just have good people that like to work together. But it just brought everybody together because everybody was trying to do, the same thing. We all had a common goal. Everybody was working hard. There was no slacking. There was tons of ingenuity and so many just wild problems that had to be solved. I mean, we were going along and just hadn't considered, well, what if somebody gets sick? Then what are we going to do? Everybody has to go home then, and so somebody did get sick, and they turned out to be okay. But we stopped everything and had another company come in and disinfect the entire thing. And then everybody came back. But from then on, we divided into teams of 4 that were color coded, and they would actually they were isolated from each other, and they would pass parts back and forth. We made our lunchroom, kind of the central room, we called it the airlock. And we put parts on. Looking back, it almost doesn't seem like it was this big a deal, but then we had no idea. Yeah, so we put parts on a table, disinfect it, walk away. Somebody else would walk in, disinfect them and grab them. And so if one team member got sick, the blue team would be down, but the other 3 teams could continue working. It was wild. It was a wild time.
Yeah, so I thought we were doing it. Langton group was good, but that's a little more sophisticated. We were doing the same thing. We had somebody disinfect, because I own a landscape company also, and we were disinfecting all the trucks. So we had one person that would just go, and honestly, looking back on it, they had a real crap job, because they were going into every truck and spraying Lysol on wheels. But then we got an infrared light and shining an infrared light, because that's when they're saying infrared would kill it. So we had infrared lights shining on all of our truck keys. So so it's like, yeah, we all went through those precautions that look back on it now that look a little bit crazy, but it was a good stress test, and they did make the teams come together. So, I always like to get into like talking about like family and background and stuff. Before I get to that, is there anything that I'm missing that you'd like to talk about with your company and your mission in automation? Or do you think did we cover the work aspect of you?
We've probably covered it. I think we just we want to find those things that are difficult and make automation easier for people, kind of like what you're doing.
So talk to me about the not the work, Russell, but the younger, the child that turns into a man. Because it's always interesting to hear people's backgrounds and how they become leaders in the first place. For me, my story is kind of more sports background, but take me back to when you were a kid in school, staring out the window, thinking about something you were going to make, and the teacher was probably telling you, pay attention to the chalkboard.
Yeah. Back to when I still had hair for all these real world problems. Yeah, good question. So like I say, I grew up in this little town called Grantsville, Utah. And I think some of the things that I learned there were it was before the days of we're all staring at our cell phones. And so we had to find these other ways to entertain ourselves. And so it was a lot of, we would jump on our bikes with real live guns, and take them up into the field and just shoot things, and just drive around, ride our bikes around, and just have adventures. Right. And, we would make, we'd make potato guns. We would make, I don't know, all kinds of things. We'd make these crazy contraptions that we'd put together with wheels, and ride down these big hills, and watch them just explode at the bottom. Right. And we should have died so many times. We didn't. And then I think working with my dad was, he always liked to, he was an entrepreneur. He started a couple of businesses, and he would always like to make little inventions, and would always say, I've got this problem. How do you think we should solve it? And so we'd break out, paper and pens at the dinner table, and just come up with all these ideas of how I might solve things. He was an engineer. And so I think that kind of went into, we would build cars, loved cars, still love cars. We'd build all these cars in the garage, and we'd be working on cars late into the night. And it was just kind of out in the boonies. And so didn't have huge budgets. We just had to make things work. And so yeah, cars was a big part of it.
What's your favorite car? What kind of car guy are you?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like I've lost my identity. My dad had, I think, 4 Corvettes. He was always a Corvette man. Grew up loving Corvettes and wanted to buy one. When I was an engineer at National Instruments, I bought one. It was not a good experience. It didn't go well. It was a very budget car, had a lot of problems. And then when this business started to go well, I thought, I can go buy that Corvette I've been wanting now. It was kind of one of those realizations where I stopped and I go, I don't want that anymore. And it was actually really sad and kind of disappointed. I thought, what do I want? I don't know. So right now I drive around in my farm truck, and I just love it. It hauls anything, and I pull trailers with it. And for some reason, just pulling a trailer or driving a tractor just makes me very fulfilled in life.
So what year Corvettes did your dad have?
He had a 66, a 68, an 84, and an 85, and he still has the 85.
So what year was your bad experience Corvette?
Mine was a 94. It had the old Opti Spark ignition, and it was just a nightmare. It had all kinds of problems. So we thought that's what it was. We replaced it, and it turned out it was actually, that wasn't the problem. We replaced the good part with the bad part. And it wasn't until I finally got Mark. I said, Mark, I can't figure this out. He said, I'll come over and help you. So he came over, we cracked the ECU open and soldered wires to the output connectors of the ECU and put them into a scope and watched the signals on the scope until we figured out what was going on. It was some wacky, at a certain temperature, one signal would drop out, and there were actually two things going on at the same time. So anyway, we threw enough engineering at it that we finally got it figured out.
You should have sold that back to GM. That had to be more of than just a Russell problem, Okay, so you hit a hot point with me with cars. So first car I had in high school, second car I had a Plymouth Laser, which was like an Eclipse, which was my first turbocharged vehicle I ever had. I love the thing. And then I got a 95 Mustang. So I'm 44 to give you an idea. So it was like a 2-year-old Mustang. I graduated in 97. I was the coolest kid in the freaking high school, doing brake torques and doing all sorts of crazy stuff with my Mustang, But looking back, 225 horsepower, that made you the coolest guy on the playground. And now look at I've got a Dodge TRX and the thing's 702 horsepower. It's crazy. But I also, since you brought up Z06 or Corvette, I had a 2015 Z06. And I would bet if you go buy one of those Corvettes, you'll realize you actually do want it.
Okay. All right.
You should get it. I think you should do it. I think you actually just got to drive one,
Right. I'll take your advice on that. I'll go drive one.
Go drive one. I think you'll want it. So we see we have the car thing in common. So you brought up your great, lovely wife, I think you might have said, who was very supportive of you. So how did you guys meet?
We met at school. We met at Brigham Young University, and I don't know that we were just really good friends for a long time. I would go on dates and come back, and she's like, "How'd your date go?" And I tell her all about it, and she'd help me and give me advice, probably bad advice on purpose. I don't know. And then I remember she, very, very organized. I can kind of be kind of a shoot from the hip kind of person. And I remember one time she said, what classes are you taking? I'm like, I don't know next semester. And she said, well, today's the deadline. Like, you have to know right now. I'm like, oh, really? So no, she's like, you idiot, I'll help you. So to drug me in there, and I was like, wow, I need this girl. Like, I like this girl, but I need this girl. I don't know how I don't know how I'm gonna survive in this world without her. So anyway, we went from just being really great friends and started dating and got married how many years ago? Like 19 years ago, something like that.
Do you have any kids?
We have 4 kids. Yep. We have 2 boys, 2 girls. My oldest daughter just started driving. There's a car story for you. So I said, Macy, what do you want? What do you want to drive? And not that she would get anything she wanted. I was just curious. And she's like, oh, Mini Coopers. I love Mini Coopers. And I thought, well, those are dorky. Well, let's just go drive one. We'll go on a little daddy-daughter date. We'll drive one. So we went to the Mini dealership, and I said, why do people drive these cars? I probably wasn't very nice, Corvette guy, Chevelles, like kind of soft muscle cars. And I just said, why does anybody drive these cars? These are horrible little cars. And the guy said, have you ever driven one? I said, no. Why would I drive one? And he said, well, go take this one out and then come back. So I took it out, and I mean, the handling was just unbelievable. The way it would go around corners, the suspension was tight. Like the thing just felt put together and sorted out from a suspension, gutless, but from a suspension setting, I was just amazed. And I came back and like, wow, this is one of the funnest cars I've ever driven. He said, yep, that's how it goes. So they had an older one there. It was a JCW, 6-speed manual, kind of the performance version. And so I bought that, and my daughter's been working to pay that off. And so she drives a 6-speed manual, and none of her friends can drive it. She can't put on makeup while she drives it or eat. And she just loves it. She loves it because none of the boys know how to drive it. So it's kind of this badge of honor for her. And it's been a lot of fun, a lot of tears getting through the clutch days, but we got there.
So you're gonna like this story. So my daughter, I still have a 95 Mustang that has a 13-pound Vortex supercharger on it, puts out 520 horsepower with the tire. I did all the work. So being the fact that you like to wrench, I also enjoy that thoroughly. And she asked me 2 years ago what I wanted for Father's Day, and I told her I wanted her to learn how to drive stick shift. And she was like, "Are you kidding me right now?" And I said, "Yeah, I think that this is like a thing that people should just know how to do." So it took me, you got to realize she learned how to do this on a spec stage 3 clutch, right? So it's not an easy clutch either. I mean, it has got a heavy spring on it, And I told her, I said, "Listen, we're not getting out of this car until you can start it, until you can start moving without even giving it gas. Like the best stick shift driver can get rolling just on idle." And she's like, so she thought she'd never get there. Anyways, a few hours later, my daughter could get that car rolling without even putting on the gas. And I knew at that point I'd fulfilled my role as a father to teach my daughter how to drive stick shift. So it's pretty cool. So
good for you. How many tears happened during those few hours?
So quite a few, a lot of frustration, a lot of stalls. And then here's what I did to overcome it. I told her, I said, "Let me tell you the worst thing that's going to happen if you give it too much gas." So I made her get in this passenger seat. I ripped this awesome burnout. I mean, seriously, my dad came out and was like, because we did it in front of his house. And he's looking at me just shaking his head because I left the black marks in front of his house and not mine, So it's kind of kind of an asshole thing of me to do. But anyways, so I said to my daughter, I said, "The worst thing you're going to do is look really cool. Take the pressure off." And you know what? That is where the turning moment was. And I think that's truly why most people get nervous about stick shift is they think that's bad if that happens. Worse, you're either going to stall it or you're going to do a burnout. It's one of the two, but just don't feather the clutch so we don't have a clutch chatter by the time we're done. That's what I told her. Like, don't slow let it out. Just when in doubt, just pop it, because at least this way I don't have to remachine the flywheel. So
well, we should have talked a long time ago. That would have been very helpful information for me. I think I remember I popped it once and said, "Here's what's going to happen. You let it out, it's going to die. Are you okay?" "Yep, I'm okay. We're okay. So don't worry about that." But I do remember when she was learning, at kind of one of the first times we drove it at night, actually, probably me and Dad, but she pulled up to a stop sign, killed it a time or two, and the car pulled up behind her, was beeping the horn, like, come on. And then she finally got out of the way and pulled over, and she's like, I can't do this. Was just crying and said, "You have to drive home. I'm not driving." And being the kind, thoughtful dad I am, I said, "Nope, I'm not going anywhere." This is life, and it's going to be okay. Like, things happen, they make mistake, whatever. You just got to take a breath, collect yourself, and go down the road. And I think that was kind of the burnout moment for us, right? Where she realized, okay, that's not that bad. And ever after, something would happen, and she'd be okay. She'd shake it off. So a lot of good life lessons happen when you teach someone to drive a stick.
This is true. Not to stay too long on this, but the worst stick shift story I have is actually teaching my sister Vicky how to drive stick shift. And she pulled into the driveway and forgot that she had to put the clutch in. This was in my 87 Celica. So I taught my sister how to drive stick shift on my first vehicle I ever owned and bought. And she panicked and then ran into the basketball pole. So not only did the bumper on my car get messed up, but so did my basketball pole that I liked to play on when I was a kid. So, but so you are right. There's a lot of there's a lot that happens in the day of stick shift learning, but so So we talked about your daughter with the Mini Cooper. What about your other kids?
My son likes he's 14. He loves anything cars. We have this old 67 Ford truck that we're working on getting it working again. He wants to drop a Cummins motor in it just because that kid
That
can drive
sounds like
anything.
a Cummins motor and a Ford. I
It
guess there's
is.
big Ford LA 1000s that have Cummins motors in them.
It's wrong. It's wrong in every way, but it's what he's excited about. Let's see. And then all my kids drive, they just drive around. We just have a couple acres. They like to drive around on that. They all can drive. My 9-year-old daughter, she just turned 10. I had a GTI at one point, and she was learning how to drive that with the clutch and the 6-speed just down the road. Yeah.
So your wife, so I mean, you guys went to school together. So is she doing? I mean, was it for same major, or what did you guys do, or what's she doing now?
No, we were very different that way. As a matter of fact, the Corvette trying to teach her to drive a stick, that almost ended our marriage. So that one, we just decided we're not going to do that. She's an art education major, and so she was an
Okay.
art teacher for a number of years. And so you got the creative art thing on the one side, and then you got me, the engineer, on the other side. So very different in a number of ways there, but it works.
So you think any of your kids are going to end up in the space you're in? You know, working with you, talking shop at night, or you see them all going different directions, or some of them too young to even know yet?
They're funny, and as I'm sure they're just all so different. My son Bruce is a goer. He's just let's just try it. We're gonna crash and burn. It's okay. Let's just go. My other son is very thoughtful, very analytical, and and very smart. He's one of the ones that early on I go, you're smarter than me. I can already tell this is going to be an interesting time. He loves to sit and do financial analysis of these different companies, and what is he, 12, 11? So maybe I could see him doing it. So maybe my boys, they might step into it. The girls, I don't think so. The younger daughter, she's going the art route, and the older daughter, I don't know. I think she wants to do the medical thing. We'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be able to do the business with my daughter, who's 22. She's my COO. She's actually running guys right now out at the golf course we're installing. So she's wise beyond her years, but she definitely followed in my footsteps. So it's pretty cool. It's awesome to be able to work with her. So that's why I asked, if you're fortunate enough to have that happen, make sure you let it happen, because it makes it adds a whole different value to what you're doing when you can actually do it with them. So
That's cool. I'm not interviewing
yeah.
you. I am curious. How'd you get that to happen?
Well, I don't really know. She's always been a dad's girl. We've been close since the day she was born. I mean, my ex-wife, I'm divorced, but my ex-wife used to be like, yeah, she only wants me to eat, because other than that, she wants to be in your arms, and that's truly how it's been forever. And I got started with like Husqvarna, just the small robots that you could do in yards. And she was 16. She wanted a job. It goes part-time job. And I own a landscape company also. I have a 200 employee landscape company. And then I have the automation company in several states, just doing this. Anyways, I basically brought home some robots and said, here, you want to try to work on these and just work on them in my office and see if you like it. Well, what's crazy is, I mean, I'm a big guy. You probably can tell from the phone, but I'm 6'4", 270. My hands are huge. And my daughter's taking out these circuit boards with her little static wristband, pulling boards and putting them in. And she's crushing it. I mean, she's fixing robots twice as fast as I do, because I'm trying to get in without touching boards. I mean, it's crazy, right? So I was like, holy cow, you're really good at this shit. Yeah, I love doing this, and she started doing that. So if there was a warranty for like one of the robots that I could claim for the manufacturer, I'd bring it home and she'd work on it. And then she just got so involved in the business. But she, as much alike as we are, I started this podcast. And if you notice, well, you don't see the background, but if you ever watch one of my shows, it's with Joe and Julia Langton. And she did like 6 podcasts with me. And one day, just before podcast was going to come on, she started crying. And I was like, what are you crying about? She's like, Dad, I hate the podcast. And I'm like, oh, she's like, I hate it. It's the hardest thing for me to do. I don't know how you just talk to people out of the blue you've never met before. So, I think how I've gotten it to happen is even though I'm her dad, I let her tell me what she's comfortable doing, what she enjoys doing. And I don't try to make her do things that she doesn't like to do. And it works very well. And what I've realized is she's kind of like turned into like my business partner is my brother in landscaping, which she is truly my break at AOS now,
Yeah.
so she kind of slows me down sometimes. And like, even during this podcast, she just messaged me and said, Dad, shouldn't you have your computer? Like, that was one of the messages that I was reading. So like, she's actually in the background keeping me straight. So it's totally awesome. I mean, I can't brag about her enough. I think every guy that goes through a divorce, his biggest fear is like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with my kids? I only have one daughter, and it didn't make a difference. So if there's any dads out there that have anything bad going on, I'll tell you, just treat them nice and mentor them like you would either way. And the time goes by, and here I am with her all the time anyways.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Good advice.
Yeah. So Russell, we're probably getting to that time where I round out by, asking somebody, at the end of the day, I mean, you've talked about a lot of robots that you make or automation that you make that truly just helps people. And I always like to ask people, like, in the end, what do you want to be remembered most for, in your life? Is it, it doesn't have to be business related. I mean, it could be related to your fatherhood, your business, a combination of all of it. But, what really makes you tick, and what do you want to be remembered for?
Yeah. Wow. That's a big question. I think what I love about one of the things I love about being an entrepreneur, of course, we talked about some of them, solving problems and building cool stuff. I love that we're helping each other to be better and to grow, and we're all going to make a ton of mistakes. But I just think that's what we're here for, is to grow and become somebody. And so it really doesn't matter that we're making knife sharpening robots or we're making lawnmower robots. It doesn't matter. We're trying to create this environment where people can, come as they are. That's great, but don't stay as you are. Like, what's the next thing? We can create an environment where people can learn and grow and progress. And I tell my employees, like, for some of them, yeah, you stay in this one role you're in for a long time. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But others are like, I don't want you in this role in another year. You should not be here. You should, as hard as it is for me, maybe you shouldn't even be at this company. Maybe this is not, I don't know if there's anywhere else for you to grow. And so you should leave. And I've told people this, that you should probably leave, because I think you have more potential than what you're doing right now. And I think you need to explore that and not be too comfortable here. So I think just that idea of continuous improvement, of always getting better, every day, and of helping other people to grow and to be who they were meant to be and do the things they were meant to do. I think that's what jazzes me. And if somebody remembers anything about me, maybe one of my employees down the road, I hope it's that they know that I wanted them to grow and become what they wanted to become. That's probably it.
Spoken like a true leader. That's what that is right there. It's selfless. It's great leadership. I think there's
a lot of mistakes is what it is.
Yeah. There's so many entrepreneurs. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, man, sometimes we're like, why do you do that podcast? And, sometimes we get into stuff I'm doing, like, yeah, you're kind of giving away. And I'm like, that's part of it. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, none of us are here forever. We're all building on ideas, the day of truly saying, like, yep, I'm sure I have an idea no one's thought of. No, there's probably 15 people thinking the same thing you're thinking right now. So, how do we advance? Like, how do we make the world a better place? Well, it's collaboration, it's sharing, it's I hope every time I produce a podcast, I'm inspiring a thought from someone that, maybe makes a better ventilator, or like you brought up, I think he said blessing lives. Your ventilators are blessing people's lives. I think that's how you put it. Um, you solved the problem and you put ventilators in places where they probably didn't have them before, and they have them now. So I think that's what's amazing about entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs are literally born leaders, and I think it's great. I love what you want to be remembered for. We have a lot of parallels with
Yeah,
that.
great.
So
I appreciate what you've taught me here too, especially that part about your daughter. I think that's really neat. Gives me
yeah,
some ideas, things to think about.
yeah, for sure. So, all right, Russell. Well, with that, I want to thank you for being on Automating Success, and I wish you luck, and keep those knives sharp for all of us. So,
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
thanks, Russell. Have a great one.
All right, you too. Bye bye.